Part of replacing your IMS bearing in your Boxster Cayman or 911 is first doing the pre-qualification on the car, make sure the engine is healthy enough to actually have the IMS bearing changed. After you change the IMS bearing, whether you do it yourself or you have a shop, a professional do the work for you, there is a card inside the box. On that card, it'll have a space for you to put your serial number sticker. In this instance, the individual who had this done in their car, they forgot to take the sticker that actually goes on the car as proof that they changed the bearing. So we'll send that back to the customer, since this customer actually paid to have his original bearing sent back. Because typically we disassemble the IMS bearing and take pictures of the bearing disassembled for the database, so we have records of the condition of the bearing. Reason why we do that is if the original bearing has failed, it's already put debris into the engine that could have compromised the engine, and you're putting a new bearing in the engine, and who's to say some of that debris doesn't damage the new bearing. So the IMS Retrofit or the IMS Solution procedure was designed as a preventative maintenance procedure, not a corrective action for something that's already failed. So that's the reason why we have you send the bearing in. A lot of people get upset that they have to send it back. Some people want it as a paperweight or a memento. That's, like I said, if you pay, we'll send, to cover the shipping, we'll send the original bearing back to you. It might be disassembled. We're not going to put it back together for you again, but you can have that bearing back. I know one person on Renlist had their original bearing gold plated. So whatever you want to do with your original bearing, it's good with us, but if you do want a warranty, you do have to send the bearing back to us. So without further ado, Trevor is going to go through the process of what we do when your bearing comes in. And usually the website gets updated 60 to 90 days after we get your bearing. We get a lot of registrations in, and this is something that we do when we have downtime, and we do them in batches. So there's a little bit of time between the time you send us your bearing and the website gets updated. So after you've had your bearing installed, the first thing you need to do is go to the website on the registration card. That'll give you the ability to upload your invoice, your service invoice for the installation, if you did it yourself, proof of purchase. And then after that point, after you've done the online portion, then you would send us your original bearing along with the registration card. And it's important, again, you want to make sure you put the larger barcode on your car as proof of installation of the IMS Retrofit or IMS Solution. In this case, it's an IMS Solution. And then there's extra IMS serial number stickers. One of those stickers, you would take it off and put it in the spot. Make sure you put your email address on there as well. Between your pre-registering your registration before you send it in to us and that serial number, then we know when we get your bearing in, which is right here, that we know it belongs to you and we can properly register your vehicle. If you send us an incomplete registration, sometimes people send us the card back, don't put an email address on it, and sometimes they don't even put the serial number sticker. It's very difficult to actually process the registration. And also, if you send us a registration without your IMS bearing, we call these flat bearings. We can't process your registration without your bearing. And the same thing, you need to make sure that you include a copy of the service work order invoice for the work done, because we need to see that the pre-qualification procedure was done as is outlined in the instructions for the product and on the website.
So upon opening your registration, I should receive registration card, a box with the bearing that is your old OEM bearing, or possibly it could be a newer upgraded bearing, but more than likely it's going to be an OEM bearing. So once I open your OEM bearing and inspect it for any debris, metal, if it's got play, if it's worn out. So now I'm going to go into the database. I will put in the number that was supplied to me from their kit. So now once I go into the database, we go over all the information that is supplied from you, the customer. All of the information that you personally submitted onto the website or the form, and it shows me all of the data that you supplied to me. And then I can go in and see that you uploaded the photos and did everything that needed to be done for the pre-qual procedure. Seeing this, that you've supplied me with an invoice showing that it was done by a reputable shop and the install was done professionally, basically. Once we get that, I see all that information and we move on to the next step, which means I get back out of the database and go into actually registering the bearing. So now I'm going to put in your IMSS or IMSR serial number into the database. OEM bearing, I'm going to submit and say yes, because that is an OEM single row bearing. The condition of it, we're going to open the outer seal of the actual bearing. Once that seal has been removed, we're going to basically go in and inspect the insides of the barrel or the bearing, making sure the internals, everything's clean, there's no damage, it's not worn, if there's any nicks, cracks, basically any kind of metal. If there's any metal inside of the bearing, then due to that, we go into a different procedure for the registration process, which we'll go over that shortly. I would have to say for this registration, the bearing's actually in very good shape. There's no metal and there's no play inside the bearing at all, so it would be a good bearing. Glitter present, there's no metal inside the bearing, so that would be no. Registration status, it is received because it's a good registration. You've supplied me with a shop invoice and everything that I need. So now we're gonna move on to getting close to the end of the registration process, where I will take a photo of your registration card to put into the database so we have on record at all times. After you take your photo of the registration card, you're gonna move over to the bearing and take a photo of the actual bearing, center stud, and outer seal. Once you've done all that, submit and continue, and you just did an IMS registration.